Um, so Philip and other people, a number of experts from the Institute of Political Studies of the Polish Academy of Sciences, the University of Warsaw, and the Polish Center for Technology Development have collaborated to develop a report, and we are going to hear from them on their findings in this report when they are looking at the current state of detection and response to FIMI. So, Philip, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Julian. Good afternoon, everyone. As you could hear, I had a great pleasure to coordinate the efforts, the work of 10 authors, including me, from 3 different entities. I personally represent Polish Academy of Sciences with a group of other people, but we also have researchers from Warsaw University, and Ambassador Tomasz Łon, who represents Polish Center for Technology Development, the entity which coordinates SalfX projects in general. Today, as it was mentioned, we are going to share with you the main findings that we received during our research on current state of the detection and response to FIMI. Before we go to the methodological aspects of our work, let me just very briefly outline the main purpose of our research. We were conducting research to identify, to map out what is the current state of detection and response within the 27 EU member states, to map out where we are as a European Union, as a particular member states in the field of countering foreign information manipulations and interference. And I would like to ask my colleague, Professor Agnieszka Cięciara, to elaborate about the methodological aspects of our research.
Thank you, Philip, and welcome everybody. For starters, I will tell you a little bit about our basic conceptual approach and what kind of data we used to come up with this report. Philip, if you could maybe switch to the next slide.
Of course. Sorry, it's quite confusing for me that I can't see you, but just let me know if you would like to change the slide. I will try to feel the momentum. I should do that, but just in case.
Okay, I will just tell you next slide. No worries. Thanks. But for the time being, I still see the starting slide. So let's move on to the conceptual framework. Please.
Oh, that's weird because
here we are, conceptual approach and methodology. Perfect, thank you. So our basic research question was how EU member states are countering FIMI. And our approach, this is very important, was empirical and not normative, which means we did not focus on what should be done, what member states should do in order to counter FIMI effectively, according to any kind of normative framework, but we were interested in what is actually being done in the EU member states to counter FIMI. So what we wanted to do is to conduct a mapping exercise as to what EU member states are doing across 4 major pillars. First of all, strategy and policy. Second, regulation. Third, institutional capacity. And fourth, societal resilience. So again, our objective was not to recommend a desirable predefined model that should be implemented in all the EU member states, but we wanted to highlight similarities, specificities, areas of convergence, areas of divergence, and patterns of diffusion of best practices in the hope of highlighting whether there is indeed a certain convergence process, even if it's not a predefined effort in terms of how member states are structuring their efforts to counter FIMI. Next slide, Philippe, please.
Can you see the next slide right now or the same?
Not yet, still on conceptual approach.
So I see that
Right there, research methods. All right, so let me tell you a little bit how we collected our data. So we did desk research, covered all 27 member states, 8 researchers, so 3 countries plus per researcher. We looked through, major documents available online, data that we could find. The final date for our desk research was 1st July 2024. We also participated, or some members of the team participated in numerous study visits, numerous meetings with experts and decision makers. The third element was an expert survey that we conducted. Now here, the response rate was not ideal. It was 20%, but I think it is still in the rather, standard margin of response rate for such surveys, and especially that FIMI is a topic that is, bound to be sensible for political or security reasons. We are still quite satisfied with this response rate of 20%. We were able, with the responses, to cover 18 member states. So again, not all the member states, but still, we are quite pleased with geographical balance. We managed to cover all member states from all the EU regions, whether Western Europe, Southern Europe, Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. We also have a decent balance in terms of size, member state size in here. And finally, again, I think we did quite a good job when it comes to balanced gender representation. So in terms of our responders, we had quite a decent relative balance of male and female. It doesn't add up since some of our respondents did not wish to identify themselves as either male or female. And fourth element, we conducted expert semi-structured, in-depth semi-structured interviews. We had 14 member states covered, again, with relatively good coverage of member states in terms of geography and size. Unfortunately here, our gender balance was somehow less, we were less successful in here, although I would like to underline that this lack of balance here was not at the level of targeting potential interviewees, but simply those experts that we targeted, more male experts, agreed to hold interviews with us than female experts. So I guess I stop here and hand it over back to Philip.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Yeah, I think we are in a group of people that it's not necessary to explain and elaborate what is EU FIMI toolbox, but of course we outline the EU's approach in our report and the way that EU is heading to improve its detection and response mechanisms. But what was our concern and the matter of interest was to identify where we are as a particular EU member states on the way to standardize our methods of detection and response. So firstly, we were mainly interested in what makes FIMI relevant for other for particular member states, and leads them, for example, to use rapid alert system to inform other member states about the FIMI incidents that they observed. So as you can see from the results of this this one particular aspect of the survey, a huge majority of them claims that the attack on the fundamental interests of the state is something that makes incidents in the information sphere relevant because it may lead to some physical consequences like riots, protests, elections, protests, and so on. Secondly, inaccurate or misleading content, which is of course a important part of incident to be qualified as a manipulative, and gives us some legal basis to start the procedure to remove the content from the digital platforms. Thirdly, inauthentic distribution of content. So we see that narratives boosted by the networks of bots in an inauthentic and not unethical way is something that makes FIMI a weapon of mass disruption, and definitely needs to be addressed by a special regulation like the Digital Service Act. We also pay attention to where we are when it comes to the standardization of the detection. One of the priorities of European Union to standardize the methods of analysis and to improve the exchange of information between entities within a rapid alert system, within ISAC, or just between official Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, between member states. And as we can see, the responses are showing us that we are far from the standardization. The frameworks that we were asking the respondents, so ABCD framework, the disarm as a method of identification of TTPs used by threat actors, but also STIX format and OpenCTI as a tool of gathering and exchange of information, still remains highly under overall general use by the majority of member states. We see that in some areas NGOs are more proficient in the use of these tools, and definitely a lot of work needs to be done here to improve and make defenders community more more able to exchange information. Now I would like to ask Paweł, our colleague who contributed a lot in the analysis of strategies and policies. So Paweł, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Filip. Yes, so about the strategies and policies, and I apologize that my camera is switched off. I have some technical issues. I get kicked out of the meeting if I have the camera on. But yes, so about the strategies and policies, the research showed that only a handful of EU member states had adopted, or at least are advanced in the process of adopting, strategies that would be specifically dedicated to countering disinformation and FIMI. Nevertheless, a majority of EU states cover FIMI threats in their national security strategies. That would be about 77.7%. And moreover, a significant share of the EU member states consider countering FIMI in their cybersecurity strategies, about 88% of them. And such subject matter inclusions in the strategy papers mainly occurred between 2017 and 2024, and had been significantly, of course, influenced by the unfolding events. So, unfortunately, a few member states had neither updated their national security strategies nor inscribed the threat of disinformation in any other strategic document. And it should be noted that, not all the member states who have included mentions of FIMI and disinformation in their cybersecurity strategies have also addressed these threats in their national security strategies. So in other words, not all member states have decided to complement their national security strategies with cybersecurity strategies, while some have adopted cybersecurity strategies without ever addressing the threat in a national security strategy. And I'm saying this, I mean, this observation is important because cybersecurity strategies are usually documents that focus primarily on the technical issues of the problem, which occurs in the cyber domain. And this may limit defense to technical activities related to the defense of information and communication infrastructure against activities identified as part of hostile operations. So while several EU countries, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, address the threat of disinformation and FIMI to a varying degree, of course, in their national security strategies or other strategic documents, the Nordic countries can be seen to approach the problem in a systemic way, implementing a whole-of-government approach through a series of subsequent documents. And next slide, please.
You got it?
Yeah, so the Netherlands and Ireland are very interesting cases, as they have both opted for having a strategy specifically dedicated to countering disinformation. And both their strategies showcase the problems of the democratic dilemma, that is navigating the complex interplay between protecting civil freedoms, such as freedom of expression and free speech, and combating harmful content, hate speech, and disinformation, while simultaneously safeguarding user privacy and promoting economic innovation in big tech. And the two states slightly differ in their approaches to finding the right balance. The Irish strategy planner's bottom-up approach, involving public consultations from the onset, contrast with the Dutch strategy, which has taken a top-down, government-led approach with specific action points to be executed by assigned ministries. The Dutch strategy also seems more threat-oriented than the Irish approach, which places the protection of a pluralistic, independent, and functional media environment at its core. So existing strategy documents do not use the term FIMI, but disinformation, which is primarily due to the relatively recent development of the FIMI framework. But the lack of terminological standardization leads to conceptual confusion, giving rise to possibility of different interpretations and consequently adapting different approaches and instruments in countering the problem. And most of the EU member state strategies do not directly translate into comparable resilience against disinformation. And moreover, member states' approach to disinformation varies and is greatly influenced by factors which are very specific to each national context. So in my concluding remarks, in the coming years, EU member states will face new challenges related to the threat of FIMI and disinformation, and these challenges will be driven by technological advancements as well as increased geopolitical rivalries. And member states would benefit from EU's assistance in standardization efforts and promotion of best practices, including on coordination with non-governmental organizations, media, and the private sector, as well as on maintaining institutional memory and on collective response measures. Thank you, Filip, over to you.
Thank you, Paweł, and we are getting back to Agnieszka.
Thanks, Filip. So we are moving to our second area of investigation, namely institutional capacity. And this heading, we decided to cover 4 elements. First of all, institutionalization of national coordination systems. Second, the use of analytical and digital tools. Third, cooperation of state institutions with civil society organizations. And finally, international exchange of best practices in terms of institutional capacity. So let me start with the process of institutionalization of national coordination systems. So here we decided to look at 3 key variables in deciding whether there is, low or medium or high level of institutionalization in particular member state. So these variables are the following. We looked whether there is a centralized versus decentralized coordination system. We looked whether the main coordination mechanism is placed at the government, or meaning central, or more sectoral, ministerial level, and whether there exists or does not exist a specialized agency, or at least a specialized administrative unit dedicated entirely to countering FIMI. So the constellations of these variables allowed us to conceptualize 3 levels of institutionalization: low, medium, and high. So when it comes to high level of institutionalization, we only identified 2 champions, France and Sweden. We also identified quite a few aspiring players with medium level of institutionalization. And here, in terms of examples of states that could be ascribed to this category, we have the big member states, and also the eastern flank states with high level of geographic proximity to the Russian threat actor. And then the majority of member states still can be considered laggards, so states with low level of institutionalization. This low level of institutionalization correlates typically with small size of a member state, with limited administrative capacities, and low level of perceived FIMI threat. Next slide, Philip, please. Okay, so let's have a look how analytical tools such as Disarm and digital tools such as STIX and OpenCTI are used by the member states. And thank you, Victoria, for the question. And the question of Victoria was whether our survey respondents reported the usage of Disarm and OpenCTI simultaneously, or only one or the other. So what we could see from our respondents was that either they reported usage of Disarm only, or usage of Disarm and OpenCTI. So we didn't really have responses where only the usage of OpenCTI without Disarm would be reported. Also, Disarm usage was reported to a greater extent than the usage of OpenCTI and STIX. But in general, not so many respondents actually declared that these analytical tools are being used. So there is really limited evidence, at least that comes from our research, that these tools are used. And this could be, of course, interpreted in a twofold way. Well, first of all, these tools are genuinely used to a limited extent, but also, and we think this is a factor that should be taken into consideration, namely that there is little information being openly shared due to security concerns, political sensitivities, etc., etc. For instance, some of our respondents, basically, especially from public administration, basically claimed that they are basically, not allowed to share such information, even under an anonymous survey. So what basically stands out as a case study here is France, one of our institutionalization champions, which is really a rare example of a member state that is both advanced user of OpenCTI and a transparent one. They basically publish information, publish the doctrine, and it's made available in the public space. Another important point, and maybe that's the final one on this aspect, is that when we compared the responses from one member state, but coming from different sectors, coming from public administration on one hand, and NGOs and think tanks and academics on the other, was that they were able to actually report on the usage of analytical and digital tools in their particular sector, but very often had very limited knowledge and understanding of what is happening in the other sector. So our conclusion here is that very clearly there is need for more information sharing, more best practice sharing, not only between member states, but also between state institutions and civil society. And for the two remaining points, precisely cooperation of state institutions and civil society and exchange of best practices internationally, I will hand it over to my partner in crime, Kamila Szymańska.
Thank you, Agnieszka. So maybe I will continue on institutional capacity. And we also studied cooperation of state institutions with civil society organizations on countering FIMI in European member states. And during our research, we identified three models of cooperation between the state administration and third sector. So the first model is a top-down model, and it reflects the situation when the state institutions animate cooperation with civil society stakeholders, and it often translates into formalized cooperation formats established by the relevant institutions. And we also observed that the establishment of those formalized cooperation platforms with civil society organizations corresponds to the medium or high level of institutionalization of coordination systems in the member states, and those countries which have established such formalized formats are those in the chart. It's Finland, Spain, Sweden, Poland, Ireland, and Italy. And I won't elaborate maybe every of this body listed in the chart, but maybe I would like to distinguish a Polish case, the Consultative Council on Resilience to International Disinformation to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, because this particular body is championed by Southex. And the idea of such resilience council is elaborated in our previous report. So we also observed patterns of how countries frame FIMI problem, looking at the formats of cooperation with civil society. And most countries, like Finland, Spain, Sweden, Poland, frame a FIMI problem more as a security problem, because the approach is more like they understand this cooperation as a security problem, because most of these bodies, like Security Committee and Resilience Councils, are connected to the institutions connected with the security sector, like MOD or MFA. But, for example, Ireland puts main focus on media literacy and cooperation with media sector. And Italy, for example, Italy's cooperation platform is coordinated by a regulatory institution, which shows more technical approach to FIMI. And the second model of cooperation is identified in Belgium, Bulgaria, and Romania, and this is the bottom-up model. And in this model, the cooperation is initiated by the NGOs. Accordingly, no formalized mechanisms and formats exist for cooperation between the public sector and NGOs. And in this case, usually, often NGOs complement state capacities or compensate for the absence. And the last model is a model of non-cooperation, and that reflects the situation when state institutions and civil society are not only completely decoupled, but the state actively limits the capacities of NGOs to investigate and counter disinformation. And this may take many forms, like, for example, restricting access to information for independent journalists and NGOs, or simulating cooperation with civil society on FIMI by establishing network of state-controlled gongos and institutions. And I think that's all from the cooperation aspect. Maybe next slide, please. Thank you. And another aspect we investigated was an international exchange of best institutional practices. This was particularly how EU member states cooperates with each other on countering FIMI. And we also identified two types of flows of best institutional practices. The first one is a vertical flow. It's the situation when it is understood as a process where solutions and mechanisms developed within international organizations, such as EU, NATO, and OECD, are transferred to the individual countries. And very briefly, as Philip mentioned, EU is a main norm setter in Europe, but also NATO has its countering FIMI activities, especially by establishing a strategic communication center of excellence based in Riga. But according to horizontal flow, it reflects the situation when the best practices flows from between individual states, from state to state, and also between whole organizations. So this may take form of bilateral cooperation, but also regional formats, like, for example, Weimar Triangle, or the Baltics or Benelux states, which cooperates with each other on tackling FIMI. And we also observed that best practices exporters are two countries, mainly France, with its Viginum solutions, and also former EU member state UK, which export its Resist toolkit to fledgling countries in Europe. But also collaboration on tackling FIMI can intersect across organizations and formats. And the example of that is, for example, European Union, which cooperates with the G7 format and in the rapid response mechanism, and also with NATO. And the potential for cooperation between NATO and EU lies mainly in the standardization of detection, analysis, and response methods to FIMI, and also ensuring interoperability. And the last, but not least, conclusion of our research is that usually we observe the correlation between active engagement of countries in international cooperation and the previous experience of major hybrid attacks, including FIMI. And the main push factor that led to the increased international cooperation and boosting of those institutional capabilities was predominantly Russian aggressive behavior in Europe. So that's all from me. Thank you so much.
Philip, I believe you're muted.
Okay, I think it's my part, and Agnieszka Legucka. I want to apologize for my voice. I have a flu. That's why also you can't see me. I'm not in pajama, but you know, I'm at home. So our part was a regulatory framework. So we found we differentiate four main levels of legislative intervention across the European member states. And the first category is the minimal intervention model. Primarily, we observed that in Luxembourg and the Czech Republic, and these countries have refrained from introducing dedicated legislation opting instead to wait for EU-wide regulations. They do not define information manipulation or external interference in the national legal frameworks. And the second level is the moderate intervention model. We found it in mainly in Austria, Portugal, Denmark, and Finland, and several other countries. These states rely on existing legal frameworks without introducing specialized laws. Austria has adjusted its media regulations. Denmark, for example, banned political advertisements on television, while Finland prioritized media education over legal measures. So this is the second level. And the third category is significant intervention model. It's represented mainly by Germany and France. Germany, because of its Netzgesetz law that requires social media platforms to remove illegal content within 24 hours of being reported. It was introduced before DSA. So this was maybe it was kind of an example for the other states. And also in France, the regulator is ARCOM, and it has extensive coordination powers and can impose fines up to 6% of platform global revenue, which is also right now it's similar with the DSA regulation. At the highest level, we have the intensive intervention model, which we observed in Baltic states and Poland, and it's because of the geopolitical factors and historical experiences. And these countries have implemented the strictest measures. Notably, no EU member state has a legislation that explicitly address FIMI. And there is clear East-West division in this regulatory intensivity, directly linked to the proximity of Russia and the historical experience. And the second slide, please. The first challenge is as I mentioned before, the lack of dedicated FIMI legislation across the EU. No member state has a specific clause addressing FIMI directly. Instead, they rely on general criminal offenses such as defamation, hate speech, misleading public institutions, or even hooliganism. It was also used, I think, in Ireland, to counter disinformation. However, these laws were never designed to tackle modern information warfare tactics, creating a regulatory gap. As a result, many harmful activities fall into a legal gray zone, making it difficult to prosecute actors involved in foreign interference. And another challenge is its diversity of regulatory approaches. Different EU countries approach the issue in distinct way, shaped by their geopolitical position, legal traditions, and institutional structures. So as I mentioned before, we have this geopolitical context, East-West division. These eastern flank countries, Baltic and Poland, have the most harsh, stringent regulation due to their experience, and the Western European countries, by contrast, favor softer approaches like self-regulation and media literacy rather than punitive legal frameworks. And another context, it's this legal traditions and political culture. Countries like Sweden strongly prioritize freedom of expression, making any restrictive measures politically challenging. And there is many other countries which have similar challenge. Other states like Luxembourg wait for EU-wide regulations instead of drafting national laws. And the special case is Hungary. exhibits minimal regulatory action due to political reluctance, relying only on non-binding recommendations, which have proven ineffective. So another challenge that we identified is a varied institutional frameworks like centralized models in France, ARCOM, which allow a single regulator to impose penalties and oversee digital platforms. We have more distributed models, such as Germany Venezia or Polish UKE, that divide powers among multiple institutions, sometimes leading to slow decision-making. And we have also hybrid models like Spain and Italy, AGCOM in Italy, that integrate multiple regulatory competencies within a flexible structure. And the effectiveness of these institutions varies, with some having broad regulatory authority, as I mentioned before, French ARCOM, and other being restricted to traditional media, for example, in CRTA in Cyprus. So we identified some implementation challenges. One of them is balancing security and freedom of expression. This is one of the biggest difficulties, avoiding excessive restrictions on free speech while containing disinformation. It's a huge challenge. And another, which is somehow it's connected in the case of social, how the people perceive, how society perceived the regulations, is the implementation of DSA, which is going to harmonize EU regulations, but its enforcement still varies significantly across member states. Different countries assign DSA oversight to different regulatory bodies, ranging from media regulators to telecom agencies, and sometimes even different cases. Some regulators like French ARCOM have strong enforcement powers, while others have much more limited authority. And institutional capacity also varies, with some regulators lacking the resources needed to monitor the cyberspace, the infosphere, and enforce compliance effectively. And in the case of the challenge of effectiveness and of enforcement, in many EU countries, disinformation laws remain not fully utilized. For example, in Italy, no one has been prosecuted for spreading disinformation, despite the existence of relevant regulations. And key obstacles include proving intent, identifying perpetrators in a digital environment, and gathering sufficient evidence for prosecution. And also this is connected with the previously identified challenge with the free speech. This overly restrictive measures can backfire, reinforcing public distrust and even encouraging conspiracy theories. So these regulations are very challenging. And I think that's all in our part, or maybe Agnieszka want to add something? Okay, if not, we can go.
Sorry. No, I do not have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, for this part, one of the aims and the methods of our whole research team was to map non-state actors involved in counteracting FIMI, partially from the bottom-up approach, and analyze its interactions, collaboration attempts with the state actors, which gave us idea about formation, if there are if there are any rudiments of creation of the ecosystem to counteract FIMI from various actors. And we found various interactions, including sort of even partnership between state and non-state actors, which of course was very unequal. But additionally, we had examples of a lot of horizontal, transnational or transborder activities for fact-checking and a lot of international cooperation. So even if the system is far from being perfect, there are already some, for some states, it seems there is a will of various institutions actually to sort of cooperate in various ways, and fact-checking is one of the obvious cases. Second one is on the next slide, the media literacy.
Yeah, I think Philip, you can go to the next slide. Media was obviously one of the key actor within these non-state actors that also have a double role within the context of FIMI, because it can play both a role as a defender, but also as a tool for adversaries. Within our desk research, it turned out that actually the traditional media is often one of the core actors who can support the state or cooperate with the state and other non-governmental institutions as one of the elements of the defender community. However, the effectiveness of how media can collaborate with the state and other actors to prevent FIMI from spreading lies within their financial capacities, and as the traditional media at the moment have to compete with big tech companies and private media, they often find themselves in the situation where this financial pressure and unstable work conditions actually hinder their capacity to defend the society from FIMI or participate in the fact-checking initiatives or education, while they are actually the actor who is crucial within all these activities, and they play one of the dominant roles actually within the initiatives from both like education, fact-checking, but also even like preparing strategic documents with the state regarding disinformation and FIMI. And I think we can move to the other one.
Of course, we have examples of a situation when those bottom-up initiatives face indifferent or even hostile approach from response from the state institution, which wants to, on the one hand, maybe monopolize counteracting FIMI and does not perceive non-state actors as a partner. Even it was obvious from one of my expert interviews, and also indirectly from the survey, that sometimes it is perceived that even when the state creates institutions or regulations to counteract FIMI, it utilizes it for internal use, for domestic policy. I even found cases when one institution can counteract the FIMI and the other institution is blamed for using regulations to target NGOs or even to spread FIMI itself. So we have polarization or fragmentation not only inside the society, but also within the state actors and conflicting approach of the state and non-state actors. And of course, those NGOs have to adapt, which is sometimes quite difficult without financing and being under pressure. And they look for partners abroad. They cooperate in clusters with similar NGOs in the region, with the EU, sometimes with the state partners like US, or even can be founded by business like Meta, which of course is not always welcome again by the other domestic players. So here we see that we are in a very difficult situation, and this ecosystem doesn't need to function even when we have some elements of it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you all for contributing each of your individual parts to this overall report. I think we should open it up to a question and answer session. I think given the number of people we have, it might be most efficient if those with questions tried to use the raise hand function. So at the bottom of your of Meets, there's a little hand. If you click that, it will share for the rest of us, and you can ask your question. Ano, yes. What is your question?
Well, my question is, what is the attitude of NGOs towards participation in governmental structures? Are they reluctant? Are they open to it? Are they trusting? Are they distrusting? How would you see that in Europe? Did you find any results on that?
That's hard to answer precisely, but we generally see that from the side of NGOs, there is rather, like, say, positive approach to interact with the government, and it depends whether the government creates platform to sort of for discussion, or in my cases that I analyzed more deeply, it was usually the response was negative, or at least indifferent, but usually even indifference was sort of a negative answer. But in those previous parts that we analyzed with Sarah on the basis of our friends' desk research, we have seen a lot of positive responses even when the state was the main power, for example, introducing media literacy. It was often implemented with support or even by the NGOs. But here also Sarah can add something.
Yeah, I can add something from the point of view of the media. There was an interesting Spanish case, I think, because they have an umbrella organization that is or initiative that came from the state, and a lot of media organizations participate in it. And they work a bit on the verge of being media and NGO as well. But what they say is they can do that. They don't take money for it. So they also do not really work with them as organizations per se, but rather like individuals from these organizations. And they can participate in writing papers or organizing events, but they would not accept any remuneration for it, for example, just to stay outside and prevent their integrity and independence.
Yeah, maybe let me just add a couple of words and present also less positive aspects. It comes not only from our research, but it's my general observation from Poland and from the previous years, that very often state is not willing to cooperate with NGOs more closely because of some formal constraints, mostly regarding security clearance and the access to the classified information or just sensitive information. So there were no screening mechanisms allowing NGOs to be a part of the system and not only contribute with some analysis, but also receive some insights from the government. And I think this is something that Resilience Council already mentioned during our presentation, is trying to address and to make this flow of information both ways, not only in one direction from the NGOs to the state, but also from the state to the NGOs. And to compare it to the examples of small states like Baltic states, I know that, for example, in Estonia, state structures, including counterintelligence, have some very informal means of communication. To exchange information, and also to let's say task NGOs that, for example, Counter-Intel observe some worrying incident, and NGOs know on which area they should focus on right now, because there is such a need at the moment.
Thank you.
All right, great. Very, very interesting question and responses. Do we have anyone else with a burning question? All right, hello, Ono again.
Yeah, if not, I have a lot of burning questions, but I keep it simple for one additional question. Do states have formal strategies towards using media literacy and other interventions that NGOs might participate in, or is it just ad hoc improvisation and just parts of the government working together to see what happens? Or is there like a KPI system to see, we measure it, we want to have those outcomes to find it?
We haven't found, I think, so many, as we could say, strategies. It's a big word for what's going on, but we noticed examples of quite stable and, let's say, already functioning, naturally functioning media literacy projects that are like integral to the system, whether it is like schooling or non-schooling, but it's sort of natural there. So but of course there's huge complexity. Even in Germany alone, you have different lands, and if over there even you have like sometimes you can see a dominance of state institutions. In some cases more is led to NGOs. So it's again very far from uniform. I can't hear you. You're
sorry, yeah, you're muted.
Sorry, is there like a strategic goal associated with it, or is it just doing it because it is in the program or it has been decided? Or is there like really a goal what to achieve with those interventions?
I wouldn't say we can see. As I said, I haven't found any documents, because actually we would have to look. Well, there is definitely some sort of overlap of initiatives, fact-checking initiatives, and media literacy, because, well, different communities organize, different societies also organize around it. But, well, sometimes it's sort of a form of practice, but it's already rooted in the system. So maybe it's becomes so obvious that it has to be there that you don't even need a strategy, because, well, it's a problem always that if you regulate something, it's whether you just organize existing things or you want to change the track of the trajectory of what is going on. So sometimes you don't have to regulate things that are already working on the ground. And of course, strategy would have been great, but then we have looked only on the regulations directly counteracting disinformation, FIMI, cybersecurity, etc. And that's actually a wider task to look through regulation or legal acts related to education, journalism, maybe general informatization of the state. There could be, like, again, a lot of different approaches, and this kind of hints might be hidden in, let's say, various initiatives inside the state bodies, because you don't have, like, even with the state bodies, you don't have a single agency or a ministry or unit which is responsible for fact checking or for informatization, or for informatization also depends, but for media literacy. You have so many different agencies even inside the state. And as I mentioned, the cases that I analyzed is that they can even have contradicting goals towards themselves.
Thank you very much.
It's hard to speak about strategy when you have different ministries doing opposite things in that aspect, right?
Yeah, that sounds very complicated and a bit thorny. But yeah, so we're sort of at the end of the hour. I want to open it up maybe for one last question, if and Anno, I'm gonna ask for somebody else this time. Okay, well, great. I would like to thank all of our speakers. This was a very interesting report, and you all were very thorough in your methodology and research. And yeah, thank you for this very interesting presentation. Dziękuję.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
You too. All right.
Thank you.